3X. Representative Kennard.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have lived in Gwinnett County since the year of my birth, 1966. 1966, Lyndon Baines Johnson was president. In November of that year, Lester Maddox would be elected Georgia's governor. To put it in a pro sports timeline, 1966 was the year the Milwaukee Braves became the Atlanta Braves and brought Hammer and Hank to us. That same year, the Falcons became a franchise. 66 was their first year. In 1966, Gwinnett's population was about 65,000. It was ethnically homogeneous, and the county was just becoming a suburb, but was still largely rural. For 57 years now, I have been an eyewitness to my county's growth and evolution. It's nothing short of dramatic. Gwinnett is now home to almost 1 million people. We are larger than 6 states. I recently vacationed in Montana, where by my surprise I ran into Representative Vance Smith and his wife. I said, "What are you doing here?" He said, "What are you doing here?" He was visiting his son. We were on vacation. But in Montana, they just have a little over 1 million people, about the same population as Gwinnett, but they are one of the larger geographical states. So in Montana, there are 7 people for every square mile. In Gwinnett, there are 2,300 people per square mile. In 66, Gwinnett was almost exclusively white. When I was in school, my entire K through 12 experience, I never went to school with one person of color. That was from 72 to 84. But today, Gwinnett is very different. It's the most diverse county in Georgia and one of the most diverse in the U.S. In 1990, we were still 97% white, but 30 years later, we are a minority majority. In our awesome public school system, students are coming from 181 countries and speak over 100 languages. I love our spiritual diversity in Gwinnett. We have 17 mosques, multiple Buddhist temples. The largest Hindu temple in the Southeast is in Gwinnett County. When I put my preaching glasses on, I see Gwinnett as a coat of many colors and a sound of many waters. It's beautiful. Now, the promise of representative government is just that, representation. In Gwinnett, elected officials across municipal, county, and state government did not reflect its diverse population shifts for a while. Gwinnett became minority majority several years ago, but its political power was still controlled by white officials. But then came 2018 and 2020, when organically, because of more civic engagement and voter participation, true representation happened in the State House delegation, the Senate delegation, the county commission, and throughout our 16 city councils. Electeds now looked a lot more like Gwinnett. The 2020 census came along, as it does every 10 years, and the subsequent redrawing of electoral maps to account for population growth and shifts. And even though there had been a significant demographic and political shift in Gwinnett, at the state level, the historically dominant group maintained their majority, their political power, and the power of the pen to create new maps. And as we witnessed, those maps were drawn to the dominant group's political advantage, AKA gerrymandering. It has been said that the pen is mightier than the sword. That actually still rings true, because historically in this nation, whoever has held the map pen in their hand has had the power. From the drawing of colonies and state borders over tribal lands in a hostile takeover of this continent, to the redlining of our U.S. cities. A red pen and a map, circles drawn around the inner city where blacks were pressured to live. Property values were intentionally devalued, creating a ghetto community. Outside those red lines, white families created suburbia, and property values were artificially inflated, exacerbating the racial wealth gap that we're still grappling with today. Currently, white families have 13 times the wealth that black families do. The pen, this pen, it's small, but it wields a lot of power. We saw the power of that pen as the new 2021 maps that were drawn and passed from this General Assembly. That map drawing was reminiscent of the past. That map drawing was reminiscent of the past, coming from this same energy, this same spirit of control and manipulation, of discrimination and disenfranchisement. It was so blatant that a federal judge struck down the maps for violating the 1965 Voting Rights Act. The pen was once again used to dilute black power. I'm just so disheartened that 60 years later, after the Voting Rights Act has passed, these shenanigans continue. Unfortunately, we are not in a post-racial society. Racism has just shape-shifted. The judge ordered us to redraw the maps, sending us into special session, but these new 2023 maps are no better. The bad 21 electoral maps are just being papered over by more bad maps from this special session. We have wasted our time and a lot of taxpayer money with this session. A pastor friend of mine once told me, "Greg, there's nothing to be learned from the second kick of a mule." Question: is it really too much to ask elected officials just to do the right thing? Is it too heavy of a lift? Is it a bridge too far just to do the right thing and draw fair maps? Spoiler alert, Georgia has changed. We grew 1 million people in the last decade, and the overwhelming majority of that growth was people of color, and they brought their politics with them. Georgia is a purple state, a swing state, and fair maps should reflect that 50-50 political landscape. How can you with a straight face draw a 9-5 congressional map? That's actually one more than the previous 8-6 map. It's laughable. You've now had 2 cracks at this and still didn't get it right. So much for wisdom, moderation, and justice. It's really disappointing. Colleagues, it's not 1966 anymore. Or is it? Between the Robert E. Lee and Alexander Stevens statues and portraits out in the Capitol Hall and these grossly gerrymandered maps, I just can't tell what year or decade we are in. Please vote no to SB 3EX. I yield the will.